Welcome in to another episode of the My Two Bits Gators football podcast. I am Ben, joined as always by my partner in crime, Mr. Randy. Randy, how we feeling tonight?
B, what's going on, my man? All is well in the land. We got a little bit of rain in Gaines, Vegas. We're feeling good about it. We're feeling good.
Good, good. We needed some, right? Pretty dry up there.
Oh, yeah.
Good deal, good deal. Well, we're excited to bring you this pod tonight. As we mentioned last time, we were looking forward to doing this before, and then we had all that NIL wackiness happen yet again, and so we had to switch things up and push this one back a little bit. But we're going to bring you some Gator player spotlights tonight for this episode, and really looking forward to kind of diving into this and talking about some of the players on the team this year. We've picked out some people that we think are going to be good players to look at, guys that are definitely going to see the field this year and probably see the field quite a bit. So we really want to get into that and kind of break down what we think we're going to see, what we have seen, a little background on them, and we'll discuss in a second here. So as always, get started with our intro, our mission, our vision, and our agenda. As always, our mission is to provide factual analysis of all things Gator football. Our vision is to have unfiltered conversation around the product on the field, as well as recruiting and overall coaching decisions. Our analysis will always be based on review of film, and while we will express opinion, that opinion should always be based in some form of fact. We will also evaluate strategy and tactics and discuss our observation of player personnel decisions, as well as on-field execution. So, for tonight, who are we highlighting? Who are we going to look at? Well, we've got 5 players on offense and 5 players on defense. Randy tried to talk me into doing special teams. I told him no. So we're going to stick we're going to stick to offense and defense for purposes of this evening. Not that I don't have love for our probably all-American punter, but we're going to keep it with the skill position guys, at least to an extent, not all skill positions. But for offense, we're going to look at Trey. We're going to look at Trey Wilson and Montrell Johnson. I suppose I should give full names. We're going to look at Mr. Arliss Boardingham. I should do that. I should do that proper accent like Randy does with his name. We're going to look at Mr. Jake Slaughter, which is on the O-line. For those who may not know, he's going to be our starting center. And then, of course, we're going to look at Mr. Graham Cracker Mertz. Then on defense, we're going to do Joey Slackman, our one of our transfers in this year. We're going to do Mr. Justice Boone, returning back this year from that injury of last year. We're going to take a peek at Jason Marshall Jr., Jordan Castell, and wrap it up with Shamar James. So those are our selections, and we kind of agonize a little over who to do when you're only picking 10. It does get a little tough to figure out which 10 you want to do. We went back and forth on a few of those. Some of them were no-brainers, but there were 3 or 4 on this list that we really went back and forth on. So I think we settled on a list we're pretty happy with, though, and so I think we're going to have a good time kind of getting into that. So the next item on the agenda is how will we look at each of these players? So what we're going to do is we're going to give you a brief background of where they're from and their recruiting stars, if that's applicable, and or transfer rating, if that's applicable. And then we're going to take a look at last year's stats, regardless of what team they were for, because obviously we do have a couple transfers on the list, though I think the only one who's a transfer from last year is actually Slackman. And then expectations for what they're going to do this season as a Gator. And that might not just mean on the field play. There might be some other intangible stuff we look at. We'll kind of get into that discussion as well. And then from there, we're just going to wrap it up and sign off. That's it. That's all we're getting into, other than our discussions around that stuff. But that's the entirety of the pod tonight. So can't wait to get into it. Really looking forward to kind of getting in and talking about the players. The season is only, I believe, something like 74 days away, something like that. It's getting close. It's getting close. So not too much longer to wait. Only a couple months and change. So with that, let's get things started off. And Randy, take it away with Mr. Trey Wilson.
Tricky Trey. Here we go. All right, man. Hey, really good topic tonight. Really had fun researching some of these players, kind of getting into some of the backgrounds, the backstory. So all of you out there listening, hopefully you get a nugget or 2 or 10 that could keep you motivated throughout the season, give you a little bit of insider information to these players. All right, so Trey Trey Wilson III, he attended Gator High School, Tampa, Florida, ranked as a 5-star recruit by On3, rated as the number 32 player, top 5 receiver in that 23 class. He was rated as the top 10 player in the state of Florida overall by the 2023 class, and that was graded by On3. Selected to play in the 2023 Under Armour All-American game. So the other thing that you might not know about Trey, he had very significant offers from Georgia, Alabama, Florida State, and Texas A&M, amongst a lot of others, but those were some of the strongest ones that he had. And so the main thing about Trey is, from a scouting report standpoint, a couple quick hits there. He's a blur on tape that zigzags his way into the end zone. Yeah, we believe it. We saw a lot of that last year, especially with the amount of games that he started, especially as a true freshman, did a lot of unique things. Quick background on him, besides Tampa, besides Gator High School, Trey, believe it or not, had some help. So behind Trey, the athlete, is a lengthy history of football knowledge and experience. Eugene Wilson II, if for those of you who do not know, was an NFL safety with 2 Super Bowl rings as a part of the New England Patriots organization. And so when you look at that, the main thing that we take from that there, with some of the research that we did, was he had a conversation with Trey, probably when Trey was around 10 or 11 years old, kind of sat him down and basically said, hey, son, if you want to get to this level, these are pretty much the things that you need to do, right? And not to mention the leader of the Patriots at that time, no, not Robert Kraft, no, not Bill Belichick, a guy named Tom Brady. You would think that Eugene II learned a thing or two from Brady, being the type of competitor that he was, right? So he sat his son down and said, hey, son, these are the things that you need to do. And I tell you what, his father basically said he stuck to the regimen when it came to footwork, when it came to being in the weight room, and a student of the game. Eugene II, Baby Bush called him his shadow. So that was pretty cool. Didn't really know a lot of those tidbits there about Trey, but you can see where he gets some of that edge, that spirit from. He definitely had a lot of help along the way. And I tell you what, Dad, thank you. Thank you. It went a long way. When you look at what he did in 2023, played in 10 games with 7 starts, finished with a team high 6 touchdown catches. You heard me, team high, 6 touchdown catches. Second on the team in receptions behind a certain Mr. Ricky Pearsall for 66. Trey had 61. Receiving yards was second as well, 538. Of course, Ricky led the way with 965. And receiving yards per game, 53.8. Trey also ran for 55 yards on 6 carries. Oh, and by the way, his honors SEC, all SEC freshman for 2023. So a lot of great things out of Trey that we saw last year. What do we expect in 2024? Well, real simple. Wide receiver number 1. He's seen Ricky be the consummate professional. We know that Ricky took him underneath his wing. And so Trey understands how to go about the work. So he had his dad as an example. He had Ricky as an example. Phenomenal. We also are going to see a little bit of him come out from the leadership perspective. Now, I know it's odd as a sophomore, but being that upperclassman, having a lot of younger classmen in the receiving corps. So that's going to be great. He is going to be a shot of leadership. He's going to be a shot in, not just in leadership, but on the field. And that's what I believe he's going to thrive in that leadership role because of his principles they learned from his dad and Pearsall, coupled with his flair and his twitchiness and his abilities. A lot of great things to be expected out of Trey in 2024, not just from a leadership standpoint, but on the field with his play, because he's gotten stronger. He's had a year of going against SEC defenses and being able to retool, refine himself in the offseason, refine some of that twitchiness. He is going to be a major role in the offensive attack for the Gators in 2024. B, that's what I got on Mr. Trey Wilson III.
I love it. Really nice breakdown. And the interesting thing is a lot of people would think, okay, he's a sophomore. How's he going to be a leader, right? You brought that up. Well, I think, one, you hit it on the head. As much as he played last year, you got a lot of experience to be able to kind of lean on and use some of that as leadership. And that's a very good point. But I think beyond that, that article that you're referring to about his dad and their relationship and his growth and development, one of the reasons that was talked about in that article that he was able to play as much as a freshman was that he was able to practice like a pro from the time he was like 14 because his dad trained him like a pro trains, right? And not a lot of kids have that kind of opportunity to be able to
Bingo.
work out, right, under those conditions, but he did, right? So he was able to train and practice literally like a pro because that's who was training him. That's pretty remarkable. That's pretty uncommon, right? That you get to be able to do that, but that's why he was so ready. So not only does he have this year behind him where he got to play so much as a freshman, but the reason that happened and the reason he was so good is because he has all these great practice habits and knows all these things to do that he can help work with these guys on who haven't had that exposure, right? Who haven't had that experience. And now he can help show them that stuff. So beyond just the experience on the field, he's got all those things that he can, kind of lean back against for to help him with his leadership as well. So I think you hit the nail on the head. I think leadership is going to be kind of an unexpected maybe thing from Trey, but I think I think he's absolutely gonna do it. And I'm with you. I think he's by far and away clearly going to be the number one. I mean, that kind of goes without saying. There was a
Yeah.
lot of talk. There was a lot of talk about whether or not teams are just going to double him the whole game, and that's why getting Badger was so important, right? To go alongside him and DK.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that? Do you think we did enough with the portal and with who we already had? Obviously, K-Jack's obviously still there and is not nothing clearly. Andy Jean, we don't know because of the injury. Mizell, we don't know exactly where he's at with the development still. We hope that there's progress there. Do you think we talked about the room as a whole, but do you think we have enough you know to help offset the temptation to just double tray the whole game if you're the other team?
We do. We don't just have weapons. We have complementary weapons. We have complementary weapons in the slot. We have complementary weapons spread wide. Like you mentioned before, when it comes to a go route, when it comes to the pop, when a lot different routes are able to be run, a lot of different schemes are going to be able to be implemented because of the two new additions, right? And therefore it's gonna, yeah, they're gonna want to put eyes on Trey. Good luck keeping up. but outside of that, having the eyes and the bodies on, now they've got other bodies to worry about that are not just complementary, they're also capable. And that's hugely important when you look at the scheme that we're trying to run.
Not just complimentary, but capable. I like that. That's a good quote. We're gonna have to remember that one and come back to it during the season. See if we see
There you go.
evidence of that on film. I like it. I like it. So I'm with you.
Yeah.
I think we did do enough. I think for what it's worth, that Badger get was really the one that put it over the top. I'm not sure we had quite done enough before that, but getting Elijah, I think, really made the difference in what we needed it to do in order to get us to a point where we're actually able now to be dynamic enough across the field to
Yes.
be able to say, okay, if we're going to double this guy, because we know he's going to smoke us, then we're just going to burn him across on the other side of the field. And obviously Mert's pre-snap reads clearly are good enough to be able to identify that, and he'll just light them up if that's what they try. So I'm really interested to see how that goes and what teams choose to do and how they choose to try and cover us now, because I think it becomes a real problem now, much more so than it was before this. Not to say it wasn't still an issue, but it's much more problematic now. And I'm really interested to see how that plays out. So it's exciting. It's really interesting to see what the receiver room looks like now, especially
Yes.
with Trey's development. So
Yes.
cool. Good deal. All right, good stuff. Let's move it on to our next player, which is Mr. Montrell Johnson. So, little background on Montrell. Pretty well documented on him, I think, because of all his history with Billy, but we'll go into it a little here. So he was originally only a 3-star prospect, interestingly enough. He's out of New Orleans originally, but he transferred as a 4-star to UF. Peculiar, right? After only one season, which is also a little interesting. He was potentially underrated, is what this comes down to, in recruiting originally out of high school, I believe, due to some of the issues that COVID caused in properly ranking players, right? So if you're not aware, a lot of players were a little underrated. Not all, but a lot were potentially underrated as a result of COVID because scouts couldn't get out. Guys who were, in the recruiting couldn't get to all the games. COVID travel restrictions, things of that nature, right? They couldn't get out and see these guys on film. There maybe wasn't sufficient film on them to even watch, right? So they were having to guess in a lot of cases is what it comes down to, or maybe educated guess, but not, it was not the typical recruiting in Montreal's class that you would normally see, right? So you had a situation where you definitely saw guys in his class that were not necessarily ranked exactly where they should be, and I think he was probably uh, in that group. Now, was he drastically underrated? No, he was a high-ranked 3-star, but I think it's clear that he probably should have been a 4-star back when you look at his performance throughout college. So his first year, he made Sun Belt Freshman of the Year. And then, of course, he transferred to UF. In his first 2 seasons at UF, he's had 6 100-yard rushing games. So that's pretty good in the SEC, right? So not only was he Sun Belt Freshman of the Year, but then he proved clearly he can do it in the big boy leagues as well, right? In having those 6 100-yard games, despite splitting time in the backfield, right? He's never been the lead back, if you will. Maybe he was the starter, but he's always split time with Trevor and, in some cases, originally Naquan Wright, right? In his first season. That didn't last long, but still. In addition to what he's done there, he's always received nothing but praise from the coaches as both a hard worker and a great person. So, really fun player to spotlight here because you really never hear a bad word about Montreal, right? It's always positive stuff. Now, he may not wow you all the time with breakout speed or breakout plays, but he is so solidly consistent that we end up taking it for granted. And that's something we probably shouldn't do. Here's an example of that. Last year, 152 carries for 817 yards. That's 5.4 per carry. He, by the way, has also averaged over 5 yards per carry for his entire college career. 3 seasons. It's pretty good. Not that many backs that'll be able to say that. So he only had 5 touchdowns, however, last season. But on a positive note, he had by far his best receiving year with Mertz throwing to him. He had 30 receptions for 236 yards, which is 7.9 yards per catch, with another touchdown added in receiving. And also, for the second year in a row, though technically you could debate this because theoretically he did have one in the first game of the prior season, but I think it got overruled or called back or we recovered it or something. 0 fumbles. 0 fumbles. That is phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. The guy just does not fumble the football. He is so reliable with it. It's ridiculous. His best 2 games of the season last year were against McNeese and Vandy, which is not a surprise, right? 2 subpar opponents. However, his next best 2 games were against FSU and Missouri. That's very interesting. And he went over 100 yards against FSU, which was especially impressive when you consider that they knew we weren't throwing the ball in that game, right? Mertz was out, if you remember, right? So really impressive for him to run for over 100 yards when they knew all we were going to try to do was run the ball, right? And he still did it. So very, very impressive game that he had in that last one against FSU. I was very actually surprised to see that. I did not remember that he ran for over 100 yards in that game. I was kind of wowed by that, actually. I was like, really? I did not recall that. So expectations for this season, they're pretty clear. He's going to be the lead back. He's going to kind of actually be more of the bell cow than he probably ever has been before, based on everything that we're hearing, which is probably not a terrible thing. He's in phenomenal condition from all indications. He's shown how reliable he is, both physically and with the ball in his hands, right? The lack of fumbling. I would look for him to develop as more of a threat in the passing game, not just as a check down option, which of course is what all but maybe 2 of those were last season, but more for, potentially option routes down the field, right? And with good backs behind him yet again, right, to still spell his load of carries in Webb and Baugh, I think you can expect him to have his best year as a Gator. That's what I'm expecting from him. Now, that is assuming, there is an assumption there that the O-line can plow the way effectively, right? That he can't do it, no back can, without a decent O-line. But I think our O-line is positioned to be better than it was last year, and he was still able to manage even despite their poor play last year. As a final note, Phil Steele has named him as a preseason first team All SEC pick at running back. That's pretty high praise. So that's something to consider when you look at expectations for this season, right? We haven't had a preseason All SEC first team running back pick in a long time. I really couldn't tell you who the last one was. Now that's not a consensus pick for that team, right? That comes out before the season from all the writers. But having anybody pick one, frankly, as first team, I really couldn't tell you the last time it happened. I'd have to go back a ways to look that up. So that's pretty cool. So those are the thoughts that I've got on Johnson. I think we've got just a really solid, great back. Honestly, something that pretty much any team would love to have there, and that's who we have as our lead back. And again, solid backs behind him, but really having him as our number one is a great place to be. Any thoughts on Mr. Montrell?
Love the wrap up there. A couple of good call outs, B. First is splitting time with Etienne. That's the thing. For the numbers that he put up was, he was the starter, but definitely not, RB1 for all intents and purposes. Mm-hmm. But as far as what he was able to do with splitting time with Etienne, that was phenomenal. I can't remember a back. 5 yards. You carry the ball twice, that's a first down. Over 5 yards of play throughout his college career.
Yep.
That is dependable, is what I call that. Dependable. He might not have breakaway speed. He might not have this. He might have that. But speaking of dependable, the other thing that I'll get to in a second here, but 5 yards of carry throughout his career. I don't care if it's Sunbelt, SEC, and especially with how banged up our offensive line has been the past couple of years. Kudos. Great job. That takes a lot of vision, right? A lot of vision.
It really does.
And the last thing when it comes to dependability, and I know exactly the play you're talking about, but 0 fumbles. Wow.
0 fumbles.
Wow.
Not one. Pretty remarkable.
Very.
Yep. So, and you bring up a really good point too. This has also been talked about. He knows this system so well. You mentioned vision. Yes. He never hits the wrong gap in this system. He always hits the proper hole, the proper gap. Right. And I'm saying gap, it's really reads the right zone because it's not a gap scheme, it's a zone scheme running system. Sure, but sure. He always picks the correct lane every time because he knows it so well. He's always running where he's supposed to be running and where the play is designed to go, or the area it's designed to go into, and then picks the proper slot to go into based on, the blocking and everything else on the play. He knows it backwards and forwards, which is super important when you're running zone, right? Because it's not necessarily run through this one gap right here, right? It's not that. It's, okay, there could be 2 or 3 that you have to select from, and it's based on the spacing, right? And you have to feel it out. And he is lights out at doing that correctly. And that's probably why you see the consistency there. So that's a really good point too.
For sure, man. For sure. And that's the thing. One last thing on to finish up Montrell is you made a comment regarding he's the kind of kid that you want on your team. Yep. And that's 100%. I don't doubt that Billy said, hey, I'm heading over here to this big school. I'm going to need someone like you. Yep. And point blank, it again, never in a negative publicity, negative light. Always there picking people up, doing this, doing that. And again, he was a big brother to Etienne. They were together. He showed him the way, kind of helped him there, right? Get acclimated, things like that. So yeah, stand out, kid. Stand out.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Good stuff. All right. Moving along. Let's go to Aulis Boardingham, right? It's like how else can I say that, right? you gotta put some respect on the name, right? Right. So redshirt sophomore is the one known as Arliss Boardingham. Basically, he did his high schooling over in California, Lake Balboa, Birmingham High School.
So here's the thing about Arliss, right? Very well versed. Played receiver, played quarterback, played tight end, played defensive end, played linebacker, played safety. He punted. He was a long snapper. He was a punt and kickoff returner. Like, what?
Did they only have 5 guys on the team? I mean, what?
Exactly. It's like, Arliss, what position you want to play next? Just put me in, coach. He was known as the versatile one, right? As a receiver, 6'5", 220 pounds, it made him very difficult to cover by any one defender in high school. So as linebacker, uses agility and strength to take down a lot of ball carriers, a leading tackler on the team, and he led Birmingham to the City Section Open Division Championship. He was ranked a 4-star prospect, number 30 overall in the state of California by On3. Number 20 athlete of the class of 22. So very good there. The race, this was interesting. The race for Boardingham was very, very late. Florida actually utilized the previously established connection that was there, the California native, and a former USC wide receivers coach, Kerry Colbert, KC, if you remember that name.
Yes.
Exactly. So it was a late push, right? He had multiple offers from a couple different schools, to mention Oregon, USC, Texas. The biggest reason he said he thought about it, when KC introduced him to Coach Napier, he said, that's the kind of coach I want to play for. Huh, interesting.
Love it.
He was so convicted, in fact, that he pushed back his signing day, right? From February 2nd, he pushed it back to February 9th just to make sure. And that was the reason why. And the other thing that he felt like he could do here, identifying with what happened at University of Florida with a certain tight end, by the name of Kyle Pitts. Boardingham said with his athleticism, with his hands, with his speed and abilities, he felt like what Kyle did at Florida, he could follow in those footsteps and definitely continue to pave that way for great tight ends that came to Florida. Talking about speed, talking about footwork, Boardingham, outside of the athleticism on the football field, playing 7 positions, also stems from a background in track, okay, where he claimed a sub 11-second 100-meter dash, like 10.7, and a 23.1 foot long jump. So there is some athleticism there with Mr. Boardingham for sure. So outside of that, when you look at him as a whole, a mini scouting report, right? Not someone's going to blow you away with how fast or shifty he is, but guess what? He does a good job getting up the field, uses his size to shed tacklers, long stride to pull away, very physical, strong hands, the ability to go up and high point the football. We kind of have seen him done that a time or 2 or 10 last season. Would love seeing more of that. Okay. As far as his history at UF, he saw some action in one game and redshirted. He made his collegiate debut, right, against Oregon State in the Las Vegas Bowl. I'm not going to say much more about that. In 2023, he played 12 games with 2 starts, finished with 4 touchdowns, 4 touchdown catches. He was 3rd on the team in receptions with 26, 289 receiving yards. As far as that goes, he ended up at a receiving yard per game average 11.12. In 2024, what's going to happen with Arliss, right? I expect heavy use for him in the H position. Now, the other tight end that we have, Mr. Hayden, what's going to happen is Hayden's more than likely going to be in the Y. Arliss will be in the H. So in Napier's offense, it's operating at a high level. The H tight end, just to kind of recap real quick, that's the tight end who lines up behind the line of scrimmage, typically in the slot between the end and one of the nearest wide receivers. And so when you look at Florida's reliance on or going into that 12-man personnel, that's going to result in Boardingham playing a significant role for the Gators. The other thing, when you look at Boardingham, as far as what he's done to get his reps in, it's funny. Last season, we saw him take a couple of strides, take some back. He showed up for a couple of games, had some phenomenal games. And then kind of some games, we're kind of wondering where he was. The interesting thing that was said about him, a high character kid that has leadership abilities and knows when to assert himself. So that comes with a lot of patience. That comes with a lot of mentorship. That comes with a lot of age, which again, he's not that old. Okay, being a redshirt sophomore, so he's going to be
not
right, play a significant role this year. And the other thing that I think was interesting, what he said in a recent press conference was he wants to make sure that he attacks all the flaws that he saw in his game from last season. He saw that he needed to make sure he focuses on seeing the ball, making sure the catch window is tighter. And in addition to that, his biggest area of opportunity, I thought this was massive when it comes to introspection. I need my blocking to be better for my teammates and for this offense to flow. I thought that was huge.
nice.
That was huge. Yeah, so we definitely expect a lot of things from Arliss, Mr. Arliss Boardingham coming up here in 2024, but all around, great kid. Looking forward to see what he has to offer in 2024. That's it, B.
Good deal. Good deal. Yeah, he shows a lot of potential for sure. It was kind of weird to see him go up and down a little last year, and I don't know if that was scheme, play design, play calling, not play design, but scheme and play calling.
Yes.
Or if it was just his execution. It's really hard to say. It doesn't stand out on film as being one way or the other, honestly. So it'll be interesting to see if he's more consistently involved this season. But we got a lot of playmakers out there now, so I don't know that he will be, but it's also a big part of Napier's offense. So in theory, he should be, at least to a degree.
Right.
So it'll be interesting to see how that looks. That's what I'm looking forward to seeing out of him this year, is just more consistency, right? Not necessarily, he doesn't have to light the world on fire and have 100-yard receiving games, but I'd like to see him just be consistent and be there and be a reliable target in the passing game, because that's something that needs to be there. But to your point, he needs to be a good blocker, because that's very key to Napier's offense as well, as the tight ends blocking well. And maybe that's why we didn't see as much consistency out of him last year, is because he wasn't blocking the right way. I don't know. So we'll see. Be interesting going forward for sure. But he's definitely a weapon. And it's something that we need to find ways to make sure we're taking advantage of, I think. And that he finds ways to take advantage of as well, right? So
see, and that's the other thing too. When you look at that from that standpoint and the comparison to Pitts, the one thing I love that Pitts would do, besides his range, besides the catch window, the catch radius, and those things, Pitts was really good at blocking. So you throw an initial block, but then he would turn, square up, go out, hands up, looking for the football. And if Mertz is not going to go long, if there's going to be some hesitancy with that, we go to the check down, Arliss has got to be ready.
Yep. Yeah, and I much prefer a check down for 7 to 8 yards to him than, the backfield for a back, right? So that's much preferred. Yep. But yeah, cool. All right, moving along. Next on the list is Mr. Jake Slaughter. So why did we pick an offensive lineman? Well, as you may or may not know, we feel very passionately that offensive line is obviously one of the most important positions on offense, if not maybe the most as a group, but certainly individually, they represent some of the most important positions on the offensive side of the football. They don't get a lot of glory for it, but they're super, super important, because everything kind of revolves around them. Whether you're passing the ball, obviously, when you're running the ball, you've got to have a decent O-line in order to make these things work. So to that end, we're going to talk a little about Mr. Jake Slaughter. So his background, he's originally from Spar, Florida, which is just north of Ocala. I had to look that up because I'd never heard of it, which is pretty amazing because I know a lot of places in Florida, but apparently there was one I didn't. Jake played high school football for Trinity Catholic. His senior year, they made it to the regional finals for state, and he helped block for a 2,300-yard rusher. I looked up the 2,300-yard rusher, but it turns out it was nobody I'd ever heard of, so it wasn't worth bringing it up. Um, he was rated a 3-star interior offensive lineman coming out of high school, and he originally, interestingly, committed to FSU. However, he flipped his commitment when he was offered by Florida, and that may partially have had to do with his high school coach being a Mr. John Brantley. Now, if that name sounds familiar to you, it's because he is the father of John Brantley IV, who is, of course, a former QB at UF. So that may have influenced him just a little bit. Of course, also being, north of Ocala, which is just south of Gainesville, location may have influenced him. I don't know what things influenced him, but regardless, he flipped his commitment as soon as UF offered him. So I'm glad he did, because he started off a little slow, didn't really play much his first year. He redshirted. His second year, he still mostly played on special teams, really wasn't playing a whole lot. And then last year, all of a sudden, he jumped up into a starting role out of nowhere, and played in all 12 games and started 8 of them with, of course, Kingsley having those nagging injury issues. However, despite Kingsley, being because of Kingsley's injuries, he quickly looked to be the better player at center within just a couple of those starts. And he actually graded out as being a top 8 returning interior O lineman as per Pro Football Focus, at a grade of 77.8 overall. Now, we've talked about these grades before. Basically, anything over a 75 is good. Anything over an 80 is very good. That's pretty much the way that rating scale works. So he's getting to be right in that range. He allowed only 2 sacks and 9 hurries in 328 reps of pass blocking. And both of the sacks that he allowed were week 1 against Utah. So, still getting his feet wet, hadn't really played a whole lot, still kind of developing the environment and everything else. No more sacks after week 1. So that's pretty darn good. He also graded out slightly higher than his overall rating as a run blocker, and slightly higher than he did as a pass blocker. And his rating as a run blocker finished the season at 78.9. So obviously very important in this offense that the center especially be a good run blocker. And he was almost at that 79 mark, right there, edging up on that 80, which is what we start getting into that kind of very good range, right? So those are the stats as we look at it from last season. Expectations wise, Slaughter is expected to be the starter despite some competition, some good competition from Roderick Kearney, for the role, who is a redshirt freshman, actually, because he redshirted last year. But he is really coming up. He was a top 100 prospect in the class of 2023. So he should be a great anchor for this line, whether he starts or not, though I think he will, in both run blocking and pass blocking. And more importantly, as a veteran, because he is now a senior and a returning starter, should help provide some much needed chemistry within the group. Chemistry, leadership, all of the above, right? We've talked a lot about the need for this line to gel, right? Aside from the improvement in talent, aside from the overall need to fill some of the holes that this line had last year, which I think we have. Beyond all of that, I think the most important thing is that this line gel and form some chemistry, right? And while typically I would put that on the line as a whole, I think Slaughter may well be the key to this happening for this group. It doesn't usually come down to one player on the O-line doing that, but I think in Slaughter's case, it may be as close as you're possibly going to see to one player kind of determining that. I really think he could drive that. I really feel like he has that energy and that vocal nature. He seems very outspoken on the field, seems to really call things out, which is what you want your center to do, right? He's supposed to be the leader of that line, and he seems to embrace that role very well. So I'm really looking forward to what he's able to bring this year. I think he can really be the linchpin that really puts this line together and makes it better, hopefully significantly better than last year. I do have confidence it'll be better. I don't necessarily know if it'll be significantly better, but if it is, it's gonna be fun to watch. So I'm really hopeful that he can help drive that, and that's what I'm looking for.
I dig it, man. I dig it. Great points there. You say gel, and I agree that offensive line needs continuity. It needed a lot of those things, and for all intents and purposes, as much as I would have liked to have seen Kingsley play more, because of all the struggles, because of all the scar tissue, I'll just say it like that. I think it was good for Jake to get the reps that he got because it was a necessity.
Absolutely.
You know, created some scar tissue, and that is going to equate to this fall in 24 is going to equate to him being the glue or the anchor of that offensive line. Like you said,
Yep.
calling out, communicating, being very vocal, right? And so I just think, again, for what it was and literally to have to thrust him into that position and fight for it the way he had to in the trenches. And like we talk about SEC football being won and lost in those trenches. I think he's got a good bit of scar tissue that he can go back and he's learned from, and that's going to make him an absolute asset on that offensive line to keep it together this fall. Completely agree.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. I love it. All right. Moving along, Mr. Graham Cracker. Let's hear it.
Oh, Graham Cracker Mertz. So I'm trying to keep this as short as possible. But for those of you who don't know, he is a red shirt senior. A red shirt senior. All right, let's get into old Graham Cracker. He led Blue Valley North to a 6A state championship as a junior and to state runner-up as a senior. In his senior year, he completed 61.1% of his passes for 3,886 yards and a state record 51 touchdowns. He was a finalist for the Elite 11 quarterback competition 2018, and he was named Gatorade, not national, but Gatorade Kansas Football Player of the Year. So again, the main difference is our good friend and new Gator, DJ Lagway, was named the Gatorade National Football Player of the Year. Graham was named Gatorade Kansas Football Player of the Year. Slight discrepancy, but still a great honor.
Yes, absolutely.
Exactly. So invited to the All-American Bowl after a senior season. He set a bowl record, 5 touchdown passes, named MVP. So here's the thing. Mertz, consensus 4-star, number 4 quarterback overall coming out of Overland Park, Kansas, and Blue Valley North in the 2019 class. Here's the interesting thing. He was rated the best pocket passer in the class of 2019. 21st high. Yeah, 21st, highest rated recruit overall. He was also rated the 3rd highest pro-style quarterback, the highest rated Kansas recruit, and the 65th highest rated recruit overall. So where did some of that come from? Where was some of that? I'll tell you what. People who don't know, his father, Ron Mertz, used to be known as Big Ron. He played football as an offensive lineman at Minnesota from 89 to 92. Get this. If we'll talk about a competitive family, Graham has 2 sisters that played college basketball. Lauren over at Kansas State, Maya Drake. Both great in their field. The other unique thing about Graham is that, obviously there were high hopes for him coming out of high school, going into Wisconsin. And it just never panned out, right? When it came to what happened, COVID, when it came to the QB battle that he had there, for whatever reason, just could not get it to click. And, the funny part is some of his scouting reports showed that, he did a really good job of protecting the football. He's a polished pocket passer. He throws a catchable ball. He has clean mechanics, does a nice job limiting turnovers, but he won't dominate you with his arm. Interesting. He might have difficulty downfield. Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And mainly downfield is going to be accuracy on a play-to-play basis.
Mm-hmm.
I think we might have seen some of that there, B.
Mm-hmm.
Might have seen some of that. The interesting thing is when he entered the transfer portal, right, the end of 22 season, Napier had a great phone call with Paul Christ, his former coach, and basically the way that Christ and the other people in the staff spoke about him, they basically said, great guy, great kid, great acumen. He's smart. He's intelligent. He's got a lot of great tools in his toolbox. For people who don't know, when he came in to Florida for his visit, there was an exchange between he and Ricky Pearsall. B, do you remember this?
I'm not sure if I do or not. You're going to have to refresh my memory.
Okay. So he comes for his visit. He goes down to the swamp. He's touching the grass. He goes, wow, this is the swamp, huh? It sure is hot and humid. But basically looking around, and he sees this kid catching passes. It was Ricky Pearsall, who came over from Arizona State. And Ricky said, "Oh, you think about coming here?" He said, "Yeah, I am." And Pearsall basically said, "Yeah, hopefully I can help change your mind. Watch this." And Pearsall just went off, just route running, catching, moving. And then when Mertz saw that, he said, "Oh yeah, I can see myself playing here. Absolutely." And it's funny, ever since that interaction, Mertz and Pearsall have been best friends ever since. Phenomenal. Phenomenal. So, anyways, there's that. Enough of that. 2023. What do we see last year out of Graham? Played 11 games, not 12 because of course, Missouri game, the iconic breaking tackle where he broke his collarbone. So that was what it was. Overall rating 157.78, 261 completions out of 358 attempts. Good for 72.9%. Wonderful. 2,903 yards, 20 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, averaged 263.9 yards per game. So, what do we expect out of Graham in this fall of 2024? Well, I'll tell you what, we can't say enough about what he came in here last fall, 2023, and did by being the MacGyver. You want to call it the glue, the duct tape, and the paper clip and chewing gum that kind of held things together, especially when you look at leading what he led. Now in year 2, we'll see how much he can grow and take his leadership to the next level because he's obviously doing a great job with DJ Lagway, so much so that DJ's father shouted out to Mertz and his family for all the love and the mentorship of DJ on Twitter. It was a great exchange, right? And Mertz's biggest thing for returning, besides, improving the draft stock, getting another year under him, he was quoted as saying, "The season didn't go the way we wanted it to." And I think that was the main driving force in returning. Obviously, you grow up your whole life playing this game. You want to go to the NFL. And I had the choice between the two. And I think in the end, being able to come back, be with this team for another year. I mean, I care so much about this place. I feel like I owe everything that I've got. One thing I need to do a better job at is throwing the ball down the field and making more explosive plays. Phenomenal. Yep. I mean, couldn't have said it better. It came from the horse's mouth, right? So we know the leadership is there off the field. We know the leadership is there on the field. We have a much more hopeful, better understanding of the offense. We have the implementation of Russ, whatever role he's going to be in, Mr. Callaway. Maybe there's a package play or design or this, that, and the other. DJ coming in here and there, whatever that looks like. I look for Mertz's leadership ability to excel, not only on the field, but off the field. But in addition to that, he's more comfortable in the offense. He has a lot of weapons. There's a lot of weapons at wideout. There's a lot of weapons behind him. There's a more refined offensive line that is going to show more gel and glue and continuity. I expect great things out of Graham this fall. What do you got, B?
Well, I love the analysis and I love the background. Really good stuff there. I'm still on the fence, man. I'm still on the fence. I worry about this. I worry about this downfield ball thing, man. I worry that he's got that thought too high in his head and that he may force some of them because it hasn't been his strength historically. It's in the scouting report, right, that he may struggle with the accuracy of that ball. And it worries me that if he's got it in his head that he needs to do that more, that he presses that ball too often and that we get some throws that we don't want. That's the only thing that's lingering with me. Now, listen, I'm not saying that happens, but it is the thing that sticks in my brain about him. You know, don't get me wrong. I don't want Captain Checkdown. And I'm not calling him that. I think he did a fine job last year, and I think he made the appropriate reads. And I think in a lot of cases, the offense dictated him doing that much more so than he jumped to it. I really do. I put that much more on Napier's offense than I do on Mertz. We talked about it last year. Mertz took the flack for it, but I think it was Napier's offense that caused it much more often. I'm not saying he never missed a read deep, but more often than not, it was him being smart, not the other way around. But it just concerns me because of the offense I know we're working with. that he's going to see something that goes, well, maybe I can get that in there and chuck it. And I don't like it. I don't like that. My hope is that's not what happens, but it just bothers me that it could. And that's the only thing about all this that stands out to me as being this. And I've been hearing it since the spring, and I'm going, I don't know, it's just bugging me. It's bugging me that it could be an issue. Now, listen, I could be totally wrong. He could make the right decisions. He could just be looking for it more. And when it's there, he'll find it. And when it's not, he'll still check down. And he knows the offense very well. He has a better understanding of it now than he did last year, right? All of those things. And it could be that he'll just be more inclined to look at it and then make the right decision when it's there. And when it's not, still make the right decision and go somewhere else, right? That could be all it ends up being. And hey, that'd be great. That'd be ideal. And listen, it's very possible that's the world that we live in, right?
Yeah.
I just also see a universe where he's got this thing in the back of his head. You got to get some more plays. You got to get some more plays, Graham. Maybe I can get that one. I don't want that. I don't want maybes. I don't want forcing it in, right? That never goes well. So that's my only lingering concern with any of this stuff. Other than that, I totally agree. The leadership, the understanding, the field general, the guy who's going to go out there and die on the hill for you as he proved last year. I love all of it. I love having him. And don't get me wrong, I'm not making an argument to change anything or do anything differently. It's just a concern that's living in the back of my mind, right? What's living in the back of his is going deep. What's living in the back of mine is don't force it. So that's it. That's all I got.
Dig it. I get you.
All right. So with that, we wrap up offense and we'll move this train along to the defensive side of the ball. And with that, we will start with Mr. Joey Slackman. So for those who do not know, this is the one transfer of this season that we have on the list. We have multiple transfers on here, but only one from this season. So Mr. Slackman, we'll give you a little background here. Joey's originally from Long Island, New York, and he originally went to Penn as a wrestler, not a football player. Interesting fact I found out. Pretty surprising. I did not know that. His father was also a wrestler and got him into doing this at a young age, though he did not like it at a young age. Interestingly enough, he much preferred playing football, which was kind of funny. So this would actually pay off for him in a couple of ways as he got older, because he would be able to not only leverage his wrestling training, I should say, but he would be able to leverage it in doing something that he loved in playing football. So kind of a double payoff there for him. Excuse me. He was originally recruited to Penn for wrestling, as I mentioned, but after the COVID season and shutdown, and after he tore his ACL and meniscus in his first season, he took a gap year, and then he came back and actually walked onto the football team. In his first game, he recorded half a sack in playing for Penn. And then afterwards, which he went on to have an okay first season after that. But then his next season is what we'll talk about in his stats, so I won't get into that in this section. But then, of course, he ended up transferring to UF after that next season as a top 100 transfer portal player. Depending on which ranking system you look at, it's anywhere from I believe 35 to 47, depending. So actually, I guess it's top 50, really. So last season, stats-wise, Slackman was named the Ivy League Defensive Player of the Year and recorded 50 tackles. Now, only 23 of those were solo, but as an interior defensive lineman, right, that's typical because you're usually kind of gang tackling from that position. He also had 12 tackles for loss. Now, that's a good number regardless of position on the D line. But as an interior defensive lineman, that's ridiculous. So for those that don't know, typically this goes back to that whole Ndamukong Suh thing from a few years back, right? Well, several years back now. But the point is that the interior defensive linemen are there to jam up the middle. They're not there to make tackles. That's not what they do, right? Guys like Vince Wilfork and Ndamukong Suh, they're freaks. They stand out because they make tackles and sacks and things of that nature that players at their position, they don't make those plays. Their job is to clog up the middle so that you can't run the ball in there and you have to bounce it outside so that a linebacker or defensive edge, right, can make that tackle. That's what their job is. Not Joey, apparently. He gets in there and makes the tackle, which is remarkable because you're getting off usually a double team from a guard and a center, and you're still making the tackle. That's just pretty crazy, right? So he also had 4 sacks to go along with those 12 tackles for a loss. He additionally had 4 quarterback hurries, a pass breakup, and a blocked field goal. Wow. Pretty impressive stuff. Pretty impressive stuff that he would get a blocked field goal as a defensive lineman. Now, obviously, that was on special teams, but you don't typically see guys of his size and stature getting the blocked field goal. It's usually, again, the edges, the lanky guys, right? Or even sometimes the corners coming around the edge diving for it, right? Those are usually the guys that are going to end up with a blocked field goal stat, not a defensive lineman. It's very atypical, not something you normally see. So, having said that, and giving you that impressive stat line, what are the expectations? It's a little hard to call because he did have a torn bicep that he was coming off to start spring camp. So he's been limited thus far. And Caleb Banks, from all indications, has been playing extremely well so far in the offseason from all the reports that we're getting. But whether Slackman ends up being the starter or not, he would definitely be heavily involved in the rotation, and he's going to be a solid impact player in the interior of the defensive line to help shut down the run game and also push the pocket back into the face of the opposing QBs, right? This is an element that UF really has been missing in recent seasons. So despite having Big Dez, right, despite having Caleb and Cam Jackson, which Cam Jackson really started to come on a little at the end of last season, and I think will be quite good this year too. I'm really glad that he's coming back along with Caleb, especially with what Caleb's looking like so far. But getting more of this from the interior of the D line, whether it's Caleb, whether it's Slackman, whether it's Cam Jackson, it's going to be a huge gain if we can really get more consistent play and consistent push from the interior of this D line. And it's as deep and as solid as it's ever been, maybe not ever been, but as it's been in a long time at Florida. And I'm really excited for that. And I think Slackman's going to be a huge, huge part of that. Regardless if he ends up being the starter or not, again, he's going to be getting as many snaps as a starter would, because again, we're going to have rotation here. And that's really, really important. Keeping those guys fresh because of the biggest guys you have on defense, right? They're the heaviest. They're the guys that are going to get winded the most easily. It's super, super important. So it's a huge thing. It's a huge thing. So I'm really excited to see what Joey's going to be able to do, especially with his unique background coming from wrestling. See what his arm talent looks like, right? The ability to get off blocks, because that's where wrestling's really going to help him, right? In his maneuverability there in the trenches. So really going to be cool to watch, and I'm looking forward to it.
Man. So in other words, I take all that to mean you want to be a good tackler, you got to start wrestling.
Maybe. At least if you want to get off blocks, you got to start wrestling. I don't know about tackling, but you want to get off blocks, you got to do it.
well, that's the thing, right? So whether it's getting off the block, the main thing, and of course, when you look at wrestling at that level, it's not, Monday Night Raw, rest in peace, or what is Monday Night Raw still on? I don't know.
I don't know. I don't watch wrestling, but maybe.
To 30 years ago when I was a child. No, but so when you look at that, Greco-Roman style wrestling, right, that we see in high school, college, the Olympics, things like that, what that basically translates into footwork, agility, technique. And I mean, he's a big man, sure. Outside being a big man, what that translates to is I know how to move my body and use different parts of my body to get the position that I want.
Huh. Well, and I think also I know how to use your body weight against you.
Bingo. There's the other point. That's it. 100%. Not just my body, but hey, I can, if I move you here, if I pin you here, if I turn you here, I can get the L word, leverage, and move you accordingly. That's awesome. Had no idea.
I love it.
Great.
All right. Good stuff. On to the next.
All right. Here we go.
Is
Mr. Boone.
Mr. Boone. Yes, indeed.
So, for those of you know the name Justice Boone, why that name sounds so familiar, he was supposed to be our very intense edge player, and he was supposed to be on one side of the edge, and the other guy, we won't mention the name, whatever, was supposed to be on the other side. They would have been an incredible force. So I'll tell you what, Justice Boone, redshirt junior, what a kid. What a kid. For those of you who don't know or might not, the name might not be as familiar, he was anticipated as having a great fall 23, but he did tear an ACL at the end of camp, and that obviously sidelined him last year. That's why he didn't play. So let's go back to background real quick. 4-star edge out of Sumter High School. No, not Sumter, Florida. Sumter High School in South Carolina. Basically, he was recruited by a name that we don't really mention anymore, but Todd Grantham and David Turner. Allegedly, when Todd Grantham saw him play, he started drooling and said, that guy would work well in my system. So that was what it was. Rated a 4-star prospect, considered the second best overall prospect in South Carolina, according to On3. So did a lot of amazing things. And not to mention, he helped lead Sumter to South Carolina's high school league Class 5A lower state championship after 8-0 start in the 2020 season. Justice was actually very highly recruited. He chose Florida eventually over offers from Arkansas, Georgia, South Carolina, Tennessee, Oklahoma, North Carolina, Penn State, and about a dozen others. So 4-star edge, freak of nature, very, very good physical abilities. Now, the other thing I found that's interesting is when most people see the name, they're going to just say, oh yeah, Justice, Justice Boone, no big deal. And the interesting thing is, in an interview that he shared, his name is actually pronounced Just Us. It was actually given to him by his mother when he was conceived in the hospital. His biological father, nowhere to be found, nowhere present, hadn't heard from. So it was just him and his mom. Mom hadn't really picked out her name, wasn't sure what to do. She kind of looked around the room, saw there was nobody around but just us, and she said, yeah, that's it. It's just going to be you and me, just us, because no matter where we are in the world, no matter what we're doing, no matter who's with us, it's just us. So unique story regarding his name. Another thing, yeah, right? Another thing about Justice Boone is that he used to wear the number 12 jersey. Okay. Huge change for him because as of 3 months ago, he traded in that number 12 for number 1. He says he wears it with pride every day. He comes in here every day trying to work his tail off, letting everyone know that he's grateful for the opportunity, will not take it for granted, and he's so appreciative of it. Billy Napier said, Justice Boone is one of my favorite players, my most favorite players I've ever coached. He's probably one of the most real young men that we have. He's transparent, holds people accountable, speaks the truth, and I think has grown as a person, as a leader that has affected our team. Right? Here's the other unique thing about him, and this is rare, but when you look at him from a leadership position, yep, he was on crutches. Yep, obviously not able to play. ACL injury, serious injury. And when you look at travel rosters in the SEC, what you're able to bring, you bring certain guys on the road. Justice Boone on crutches is at every single game on the road, and not in a press box, not just in the locker room, on the sideline, front and ready, talking to other players, encouraging other players, talking to the coaches, just there for his team. So that speaks a lot about what he means as a figure, how much he's grown as a player and a person, and what he means to the defense. And the main thing about him is been trying to contain it. So in spring practice, as much as he wanted to go full speed because he feels good about the knee, coaches I've had to tell him, slow down. We got to slow down. You're on a pitch count, right? Slow down, take it in steps. Don't go full speed. You're not there yet. You're not there yet. We got to do this as a progression. Justice is ready to go. Okay. And a little scouting report on him: plays with physicality, plays with aggression, stands out as an edge setting run defender, active hands, the ability to disengage, quick moves, agile feet, and not to mention shows chase down type speed in pursuit. Yes, please. So phenomenal there. Phenomenal there, right? In 2022, he appeared in all 13 games. He started 2 of those games, finished the season with 24 tackles, a tackle for loss, a sack, and a QB hurry. Obviously, last year, made no appearances due to the season-ending ACL injury. What's going to happen in 2024? What are we expecting out of Mr. Justice Boone? Oh boy, the edge is going to be alive and well. AA and Big Daddy Ron are going to use him in a unique scheme to get that defense really to pressure the quarterback. I fully expect him to be an instigator on that D line. I fully expect for him to make his teammates accountable, fully accountable to each other and their mission and their vision and their goal in playing for each other. And not to mention, this is going to be a bold prediction, B. I don't normally do this, but I firmly believe he's going to be top 5 in the SEC when it comes to sacks on the D line. I'm just going to put that out there right now. I believe that much in what he's coming back this fall, what he's got in store for, all that pent up energy that he's going to be able to display on the field now. I'm just going to throw that out there. And I know it's a lot of hype. I know it's a lot of orange and blue, but I'm so excited to see this kid on the field play.
I like it. Yeah, he's an interesting one to watch this year for sure. And by interesting, I mean because of his potential. We were really looking forward to see him play last year. I think it's funny because as much as Princely has a lot of good skill sets, and I know you didn't want to mention his name or whatever, and he does. He's a very talented player. I think maybe the one thing that Princely did not necessarily have, or certainly didn't show last year, is the explosion. His explosiveness off the line, it never really popped for me. And I think that's probably part of the reason why he would get off his defender a lot, right? His win rate was really high. It was one of the things he graded out really high on PFF. But the problem was he typically would be one step late in getting to the quarterback, right? He'd get there just a second too late. So his hurries were really good, and his win rate against his man was really good.
Yep.
But it didn't result in a lot of sacks because he just couldn't quite get there in time. I'm going to tell you that assuming Boone comes back from this injury the way he looked before it, which is always an assumption, but typically guys at his position do okay with that. It's usually not like a running back thing where you have to cut a lot. It's usually just, a recovery thing, and then you come back and you're just running more or less straight line as long as you've got the leverage to get off the ball, right? But the interesting thing about Justice is he always looked like he had more than enough explosiveness, right? So
yep.
That's the thing with him that I'm really interested to watch and see is do we still see that, and do we get that again in that nature of just being able to really just fly off the line when that ball gets snapped? Because that was always the thing that really impressed me about him when we did see him play that first season, is he was just really, really coming off the ball in a very explosive way. And so that's the thing that I really want to see as much as anything, because I think that is what can really make a difference from his position. So, and especially again, having some talent across the line from him, obviously, whether it's, Searcy or Sapp or potentially even McCray, right? Though I'm not sure they all are going to end up playing across from him, but regardless, it's going to be interesting to see nonetheless. So a lot of fun options going on the D line here, and in many different positions. So it's fun to talk about for sure.
Man.
But good stuff there. I know that's one that was real heartbreaking for you last year, and I know you're really excited to see him get back at it this year, and so am I, But I know, especially for you, that's something that you're really looking forward to. So it'd be good to see that happen. So
Yes,
anyway,
sir.
moving along. Next on the list, Mr. Jason Marshall Jr. All right, Jason. Um, this is one that I was very much looking forward to doing. And I really wanted to talk to it for a few different reasons. So I'll get into it here, and then we'll get to that in a minute. So background on Jason: he's originally from Miami, and he played high school at Miami Palmetto High as both a corner and wide receiver, and he helped get them to the state semifinals in his senior season. He was then invited to play at the Under Armour All-American game following his senior season, and he is one of the very few five-star recruits that Dan Mullen actually landed. Pause for effect on that joke,
Nice.
though it is true. And he was the number 3 rated cornerback in the country for the class of 2021. So pretty impressive recruit status, you would say. He was also a Max Preps All-American as well in high school. So a lot of accolades, a lot of highly touted pedigree, you would say, coming out of high school. And he played as both a freshman and a sophomore for UF, starting all 13 games his sophomore season under Napier and playing fairly well. Probably, I would say, above average for a sophomore corner, really. Looked pretty good. And the expectations were quite high. He didn't allow a touchdown his sophomore season. He graded out as one of the better cornerbacks by Pro Football Focus his sophomore season. So the expectations were pretty up there. He was rated as one of the top 10 returning cornerbacks by Pro Football Focus for expectations for his junior year. And then we kind of know what happened, right? It didn't go so well last season. Though I will say, I do feel very much it was a tale of two halves of the season for Marshall. The first half of the year was basically abysmal. He gave up play after play. He looked either lazy or just beaten. I'm really not sure which. And then something happened, and it happened after the Vandy game. Now, technically, Vandy game was the 4th game that he played in because he did not play against Charlotte or McNeese, which I did not know. I had to look up the stats on that. But he did not play in either one of those games, by the way. But he gave up a huge play after not being properly awarded a penalty for a face mask, and he absolutely should have been, but he wasn't flagged. And then he just gave up on the play when he wasn't flagged. He just started asking for the flag and gave up a touchdown. But after that happened, everything seemed to kind of change. His play showed a renewed intensity and effort, and it can be seen in his stats, at least to a degree. Now, I do have to mention that I could not find a stat. It's an advanced stat, and that is like passing yardage allowed against. I really wanted that stat because I guarantee it would be significantly better. I know it was. I remember from film that he allowed a lot less passes in general in the second half of the season. And certainly when he did, they were not near the significance that they were in the first half of the season. However, I don't have that stat to give you. I wish I did, but it's an advanced stat that I could not find anywhere, unfortunately. However, here's what I was able to find. In his first 5 games, he had 9 solo tackles and 5 assisted tackles, 1 tackle for loss, and 3 passes defended with 3 pass breakups. Now, I don't know that they were on the 3 passes defended. That's not necessarily the same stat. In the last 5 games, he had 11 solo tackles. So went from 9 to 11, but only 1 assisted tackle. So was making a lot more solo tackles than he was assisted ones, which speaks to his level of effort, I feel. 2 tackles for loss, a sack, which he had never recorded before in his career, 8 passes defended, as opposed to the 3 in the first half of the season, and 7 pass breakups, as opposed to the 3 in the first half of the season, including 3 pass breakups, which was a high for him in a game twice. Once against Georgia, once against FSU. So those things really stood out to me because you really saw him just pick up the intensity. You could see it in his actions on the field. in the first half of the year, and really even before that, if you go back to last season, he really just kind of looked like he was just going through the motions. And then all of a sudden in the second half of the year, it was like, oh, there's Jason. It's like he woke up. So that's what I expect to see of him this year. And let's talk about expectations for this season going forward. So, what do I expect of him this year? Shut down corner, pure and simple. That's it. That's the expectation. He needs to be what he's always had the potential to be, but somehow has seemed to lack the tenacity for. But again, that seemed to shift in the second half of the season last year. And now with Will Harris leading the way as his coach, that only helps me feel more that that's what we can expect to get out of him this season. I really look forward to seeing him reach his potential and give other teams' QBs fits in coverage. I also look for him to be a leader on the defense, especially in the secondary, obviously. As a senior and a veteran, this team is still young overall and will need to rely on more experienced and seasoned players that they do have out there on the roster, which, of course, Jason is now very much one of, coming back for his senior year. So that's what I've got. I have very high hopes for Jason, as I did last season, but after he let me down to start the year, he really did make me feel better. And we talked about that on multiple episodes of the pod, and that's the Jason Marshall I want to see, and I want to see it continue to improve. So here's hoping that's what we get, and I really do think it is going to be what we get. I think between him and Devin Moore starting corners, you've got a secondary from a coverage perspective, throw in Bryce Thornton at nickel, that is going to be tough. It's going to be tough to throw the football against that secondary. It's looking really, really good. And then throw in some guys at safety, one Asa Turner and the gentleman you're about to talk about, and Mr. Jordan Castell. Man, I'm interested to see what teams are going to be able to do to throw the ball. It's going to be tough out there. That's my take. What you got?
Great call outs, man. It's funny you say tale of two halves, right? Because it was bipolar for sure.
Yeah, indeed.
And that's the thing. It kind of left us scratching our heads a couple times, going, "What in Sam Hill is going on with him?" This kid was a 5-star, really, and you hate to see kids get graded on such a high level, and he clearly had the resume, but sometimes for whatever reason, there's retrogression and it goes backwards. But I tell you what, I agreed. It was a crappy play. Well, a crappy no call. That was what it was. Okay, fine. But ever since that, it was just interesting to see how he attacked the rest of the season moving forward. And then I forget the game, but if you remember this, he had back-to-back plays in a game where basically shut down a pass, batted down a pass, batted down another pass. They went right back to him, forcing a fourth down and forcing a punt.
Mm-hmm.
And in I almost want to say vintage, vintage Jason Marshall fashion. So he's got the abilities, and if he can anchor the backside of that defense, then I have no problems. I have no qualms with you saying that's going to be a tough throw. Absolutely.
Yeah, I really think it can be. I really think it can be quite the challenge for opposing teams for sure. So be interesting to see, but I think it's got more potential to happen than not. Let's put it that way. It would be surprising to me if we saw something other than a tough secondary to throw against with those starters out there. It really looks like it's going to be tough. So tell us about the other guy I mentioned there, and Mr. Castell.
The other guy you mentioned, Jordan Castell, sophomore, true sophomore. Coming out of high school, Castell's rated 4-star prospect, the number 13 safety in the country, and the 202nd best player of the class. So this is what's interesting. I'm like, okay, the 13 safety in the country, 202nd best player in the class. Okay, whatever. Coming out of West Orange High School, Winter Haven, Florida. Okay, as cornerback safety. A West Orange program that won a district title, went 11-2, playing in the Sunshine State's highest classification, right? 4-star, a lot of competition in Central Florida, as we know. Some of the bigger schools, especially in South Florida, top classification. He held, and I'm not sure if there's a record, I couldn't find this. He held 34 scholarship offers.
Wow.
That's what I said.
Wow.
I'm like, what? That makes no sense. That's got to be a typo. I check a couple articles. I do a little bit of cross-referencing, and sure enough, 34 scholarship offers. Holy smokes! Again, 4-star, number 13 safety in the country. The two main figures that pursued him, no, no secret, or very familiar: Patrick Toney, Corey Raymond. Very, very unique in the sense of, despite those 34 offers, the main thing that stood out to Jordan about Florida, besides growing up a semi-Gator, okay, rooting for the Gators, all right, fine. Out of all the schools in Florida, of course, you have Miami, USF, UF, FSU, the bigger schools. Felt like it was always going to be the most exciting to play in the swamp, especially with the size of the swamp. He always felt like Florida was on top. He always enjoyed the phone calls between he and Coach Raymond. Not to mention, apparently, while he was talking to Raymond, apparently Tony was checking in on his mom and his brother. Showed his brothers. Showed a lot of love. Felt like family. It felt like Coach Napier was trying to establish a family type environment. And guess what? He said, "Yep, that's going to work for me, 100%." Okay, seen as a versatile defender, cover the boundary, line up over the slot, bang in the box with the front seven. Okay, and here's the thing: at 6'2", at 200 pounds, right, with a 6'5" wingspan, really good frame, really good muscle definition, and he's able to eat up a lot of yards with his stride, right? Ran a 17.44 and 110-meter high hurdles, right? His junior season track, again, another track guy, a lot of speed, a lot of agility. And so he has a lot of hip fluidity, really good with footwork when it comes to press man coverage. So that's going to be great. A lot of good things on him, scouting report. A lot of great things coming out of high school, especially besides being a 4-star, besides being heavily touted. 34 scholarship offers, just unreal. Oh, and by the way, in 2023, he did pick up all SEC freshman honors. So that was big, right? He and Trey, definitely. In 2023, played in 12 games. True freshman, played in all 12 games. 30 solo tackles, 30 assisted, 60 total. 60 total. Led the team. You're scratching your head going, led the team. The second of the team was Shamar James with 55. Mind you, after Georgia, the kneecap, did not play the final 5 games of the season.
Hey, you're stealing my thunder, buddy.
Oh, my bad. Okay. He had Castells had 1 interception, 3 pass breakups, 1.5 tackles for loss for minus 11 yards. So there's the long and short of what he did in 2023. What's going to happen? What do we expect out of Mr. Castell 2024? So following a very, very impactful freshman season that basically saw Castell start 11 games, play the second most snaps of any defensive player on Florida's roster, he is going to face increased competition in his second season, right? But regardless, his continued development should result in him pushing for significant reps in the 2024 season as he led the team in tackles last season. Definitely would not be a surprise in the slightest to see him maintain that starting role despite the arrivals of Turner, Bridges, Douglas, right? So that's going to be important. The main thing that I expect Castells to excel in next year is his overall technique. And I think one sidebar, one thing that was funny with Castells, the first day of practice, especially with Will Harris, came on. First time on the field, Will Harris comes out in a stomach pad. And the players are kind of looking around like, what's this about? Will Harris says, lock up or load up, hit me. Castells looks and said, Coach, you're serious? He said, yeah, absolutely. So you see how much Will Harris has bought in, and that made Castell's buy-in even more when we look at what happened with tackling last year in that
Yeah.
second. But either way, a lot of great things to expect out of him, a lot more growth, a lot more vocal abilities that he's going to have in conducting that secondary in 24. So a lot of great things for him to build on in that 23 season and be an even greater weapon for us in 24.
Yeah, that's good stuff, man. My only thoughts on him are let's hope the tackling drill with Will Harris worked better because the only shortcoming he really had, and in fairness, I won't even hold it against him. He's a true freshman out there playing SEC football.
Yeah.
He didn't tackle well at all. I mean, he whiffed a lot. And it wasn't even usually because of bad ankles. It was just bad form. And
Right.
and probably he's just not strong enough. So like I said, I'm not even going to hold him to account for it, but it's just got to get better because as the safety out there, you've got to be the enforcer, right? You've got to go truck somebody, as you like to say, right? And he's got to do that much more often than he did. Now,
Yep.
almost everything else he did phenomenally well, especially for a freshman. I mean, he graded out in the 80s by Pro Football Focus despite the poor tackling. That's phenomenal, right? Absolutely phenomenal. So everything I could say about him is honestly top marks except the tackling. So if that gets better, even not to a point where I think it's excellent, right? Even to where it's just good, right? He's going to be a great asset this year. I'm really looking forward to seeing him come back and really make an impact along with, again, the rest of that secondary. I'm pretty high on most levels of the defense, but I think the secondary is actually where I think where the highest ceiling lies. Let me put it that way. I'm not sure if it's where the most talent is, but it's close. And the highest ceiling seems to be there. The ability of those guys that we've already seen to play at a high level, they
Yeah.
put that together. I think the highest ceiling actually lies with that unit as a whole between the corners and the safeties. So we'll see what happens. But at any rate, moving on, our last name on the list is none other than Mr. Shamar James. I found out some interesting stuff about Shamar in doing this research that I did not know, so I will share it with you now. He is originally from Mobile, Alabama. That I did know. And he was a four-star recruit and the number 5 linebacker in the 2025 class. I did know he's a four-star. I did not know he was the number 5 linebacker. That's pretty good. He played both defense and offense in high school for Faith Academy, as well as basketball, and ran track. Did not know that. You don't see that many linebackers that run track, but he did. Perhaps
Wow.
most impressively, despite being over 200 pounds and 6'2", he ran an 11.67 100-meter his junior year.
Whoa.
Uh-huh. Yeah, let that sink in. That's fast. And yeah, I had no idea that he was that fast. Not a clue. That is legit speed. I mean, it's not tank speed, right? But it's still pretty fast. So I'm still pretty impressed by that time as a junior and a linebacker. Pretty impressive. So after his senior season, he was also invited to play at the Under Armour All-American game and then committed to UF over both Alabama and Georgia, both of which he had offers from, along with several other schools as well. This was a sneaky great get early for Napier. Right after arriving, he made his commitment and signed on early signing day on the 15th. So if you remember, all the buzz for Napier when he first got there was landing Kamari Wilson. Nobody really talked about him getting Shamar James. Turns out Shamar James was the much better get, right? And again, that's not to put a dig on Kamari. We talked about him when he left. It just didn't work out. These things happen. But Shamar was a heck of a get, and I don't remember hearing a ton of press about that at all. That totally flew under my radar when that happened, and this was a really, really great early get for Napier right after getting, I mean, he'd been there 2 weeks, and he lands this linebacker over Bama and Georgia with the classes that they were putting together. I mean, that's phenomenal. So very interesting stuff there. So for last year, as Randy already mentioned and stole my thunder, he recorded 55 tackles, which was second on the team, 5.5 tackles for loss and a sack in just 8 games. Not bad stats for just over, what, 2/3 of a season?
Yep.
But perhaps more importantly was the clear leadership that he showed on the defense, and really being clearly the leader, I would say, when the unit was actually looking semi-competent, honestly. Because in the first half of the year, this defense really looked semi-competent. If you go back and you look at it, right? It was the second half of the year when it really fell apart, when we didn't have who? Shamar. Oh, interesting. There was also some evidence starting in the Kentucky game that his injury may have been initially aggravated, right? The knee may have been starting to have an issue. And for those that don't know, he dislocated his kneecap. This was actually an injury he previously sustained in high school. It was corrected then. But basically, the thing is, if it happens again, which it did, you have to have the surgery. He didn't have the surgery in high school. You don't have to the first time. It's when it happens again, you have to have the surgical repair done so that it doesn't keep happening. Because basically, once it happens a second time, you got to fix it. So there was some discussion, some kind of behind the scenes talk. I heard some rumors is what it comes down to, that he may have tweaked it a little in Kentucky. And if you saw after that game or during that game and then a little bit beyond, his play wasn't quite the same in those next few games going up to Georgia, when he obviously then further hurt it, or hurt it for good, as you were. So that's kind of interesting, right? And really, I think a lot of his stat line kind of came before that. He had 13 tackles against Utah in the opener. 13. Ridiculous. Anyway, moving along. Expectations. He's going to be the leader of the defense this season at any level. He showed this previously, not only with his physical abilities, and not only that he has the physical abilities to play linebacker at an extremely high level in the SEC, but beyond that, that he can help coordinate the defense on the field, right? How many times did we see him helping line players up properly, right, to get it in the right gap pre-snap, right, communicating with the safeties on the back end to make sure that they understood the coverage, or that if they needed to shift, where they needed to go, right? With a healthy Shamar this season, and then add in Howard or Wingo or Graham or Childs alongside of him, right? We look to have a potential linebacker situation that could be, dare I use the word, lethal on a second level for the first time in I don't know how long. You got to go back a long time. For us to get to where we had really great linebackers, I might have to go all the way back to Spikes. I mean, wow. Anzalone was great, but he didn't have anybody with him. So I might have to go back to some Urban Meyer era stuff before we had a more than one great linebacker. And I think we have the potential to see that this year. From everything we're hearing about Howard, man, Pup looks phenomenal. So, in fact, we almost did Pup as one of these players that we spotlighted. He's looking so good, but we just didn't have quite enough info on him to do him. So it was close, though. We really debated it. I'm really excited to see what the linebacker core looks like this year. So really interesting stuff. So anyway, that's what I got on Shamar, and that wraps this up. So any thoughts you have on him?
Leader, yes. Proven, yes. Played hurt, gave it his all, yes. 55 tackles through 8 games, yes. But I still can't get over. Did you say the 100-meter yard dash at 11.7 at 200 plus pounds?
11.67 to be exact, but yes.
I mean, the significance of that is you got a guy running sub 10, yeah, but he weighs $150. Like, right. Right. Just phenomenal. So yeah, man, no, I'm definitely looking forward. That kneecap should be healed, good to go. To see him back on it's really hard to look at things not through the orange and blue goggles, but on paper, I'm not saying we're at the talent gap of Georgia, but we've definitely kicked it up, a quarter star, half star, whatever the case might be. Some of that gap is being addressed. The personnel is being addressed. And I just, it feels exciting. It's palpable, right? It's definitely getting the people going. I'm telling you.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And the other thing is that you have to be really cerebral to play a lot of the stuff that Double A is asking, right,
Yeah.
for in this setup, especially at linebacker. I mean, that's probably the position you probably have to know the most. Um, uh, about the defense and about what's going on. And again, James has proven he understands that even last year, right? Even in only his second year, really first year in Armstrong's system, right? But second year in college playing linebacker, he gets it. He understands what he needs to do. And so to be able to have that as a leadership position again, and to be able to help these younger guys that are coming in, right, with Childs and Graham, and to be able to show Pup what he needs to know transferring over with the experience he already has, right? I mean, man, it's invaluable. It's invaluable. And I think we can really produce something at that level that could be pretty special. And that to me is again, I hear you on the orange and blue goggles, man, but there's some stuff here that it doesn't look like it would be through those goggles based on everything that I have seen on film, and then looking at what the future should look like based on all of that stuff, right? If you look at what I would consider to be natural progression, right? As long as you see natural progression and assume a normal level of improvement, right? And assume healthy recovery from injury, which there are assumptions there, I grant you, but they're not like weird out of the box assumptions, right? They're pretty standard assumptions, right? So assuming he comes back from a pretty standard surgery or a known surgery, I don't know if it's standard, but like it's not like it's an ACL tear like what Boone has to go through, right? Like that's a much more involved recovery. And then you assume that he continues to progress, which he's already shown that he did from his freshman to his sophomore year. He definitely progressed on film, no question. So you assume that continues to happen, and you've seen he can be a leader. You have evidence of that on film, so you assume he continues to do that with others. Again, yes, there are assumptions there, but they're logical assumptions. So like you see all that, and it's like, okay, how do you not predict that it's going to get significantly better? Like no orange and blue. Like how do you not predict that? Like it seems illogical not to a degree. And again, I'm not saying it becomes like the best defense you've ever seen or something. That would be orange and blue, right?
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, like, to not predict that it gets significantly better based on all of this evidence, like it'd just be surprising to me. Like it would be like, wow, I don't know how it's not I don't know how it's not getting there. And frankly, it's going to be disappointing if it doesn't.
It's going
But
to be very disappointing. You're not wrong,
yeah,
and that's the thing, right? When you look at our mission, when you look at our vision, as far as having that unfiltered conversation, we're looking at the product on the field. We're looking at the
right.
film. We're looking at some of the data. We're looking at some of the numbers behind that. And that's the thing. It's tough. It's one thing to say if we were going to just talk and give the opinion, but yeah, it really, when you look at the data, when you look at it, quote unquote on paper, and then you look at it on film and you see those valid improvements, it's really hard to take all of that and not be excited for all that potential that could be displayed on the field.
No, absolutely, absolutely. I think that's kind of the gist of it. So, um, with that, I think we'll close this one out because it actually went a little longer than I thought it would, considering all we were doing is talking about these guys. But hey, what else
Yeah.
is new, right?
What else is new? What else is new?
Um,
Exactly.
so we will have another one here for you in 3 weeks. We will be talking a little about Napier's position on the hot seat and how real that is or isn't. A lot of talk about that subject. Not sure how uh, solidified in fact that actually is. So we'll get into that discussion in a few weeks here. We got some interesting takes on everything we've been seeing and reading out of the media, and what their take is on that, which I don't know exactly where all that's coming from. I mean, I guess I do to a degree, but it's I think it's pretty ill-founded based on some other things that we would discuss. But yeah, we'll get to that in a few weeks. So in the meantime, you want to take us out?
Solid, my man. Yeah, look forward to that one for sure. All right, Gator Nation, wherever you are, wherever you may be listening, thank you so much for taking the time, and we'll see you around, Gator Nation.